What's going on today is we're celebrating Jack Leslie. Jack was a footballer born in London in 1901 who played professionally for Plymouth in the 20s and 30s, appeared 400 times, scored 137 goals. Great story in its own right. But what's really important is Jack was a black player at a time when there were very few black players in the league.
Jack Leslie grew up in Canning Town, a tough part of East London. Through the First World War, he was an apprentice boilermaker with his dad at Beckton Gasworks, and it was then that he was playing youth football for one of the top youth clubs. He even formed his own side that won a cup final at Upton Park, West Ham's old ground. So he was already making a name for himself, and after the First World War got signed by one of the top amateur clubs in London, Barking Town. Jack Leslie was signed by Argyle in 1921, and he played here for 13 years, part of the promotion-winning team of 1930, and was then appointed captain of the club, and he was the first black captain of a Football League side. So, I mean, he was well loved in the city and by his teammates. He's a true Argyle legend. It's incredible to be here at this blue plaque unveiling at 8 Glendower Road, the very house where Jack and his new wife Wyn were living in 1925. He left that house, kissed his wife goodbye, went to Home Park for training, and then was called in by his manager and told he'd been picked for England. Imagine then going to the dressing room and talking to his mates, some of whom have played for England in the past. They'd have been slapping his back.
Plymouth was agog with it because, you know, it's a small footballing team really, and for one of their players to be chosen, and everyone was applauding him and saying, you know, it's fantastic. And then all of a sudden it all went quiet. And he said people couldn't look him in the eye. And he said he knew then that something had gone wrong. And the next they issued another list of the players, and Grandad had been left out. And he was never given an explanation or anything. And I think it's amazing the way he dealt with it. A lot of people that would have really overshadowed their lives. But as I say, Grandad's philosophy was that, you know, he couldn't play for England, he'll play for Plymouth Argyle and do his best there.
Now, the Football Association's minutes don't give any reasons for the deselection, but it's pretty obvious that they found out he was black, he was picked on merit, but then deselected on racial grounds. And it wasn't until 1978 that a black player played for the England full national team. So Jack was, in the words of Matt Tiller, his biographer, the lion who never roared.
He was selected for England and then denied that place due to the colour of his skin. And he had to cope with that treatment by the FA here in this house. Such a cruel way to treat a professional sportsman who truly deserved that England call-up.
Sadly, I never ever had the opportunity of being called up for international level. So, but I would have thought it must have been absolutely fantastic, over the moon, and really looking forward to the occasion. And then to sadly have that taken away from you, that would have been really, really hard to accept.
Yeah, it's a great honour that people can look and find out about him and study him, perhaps, you know. It's great that he's been honoured and his story and his legacy can continue. Hopefully it can inspire the youth of tomorrow and society now, and football, Devon, England, international. It's a story that we can all kind of know and learn from.
When Jack returned to London, he went back to his trade as a boilermaker until he retired, 66. And then he was like knocking about the house a bit and maybe getting under everyone's feet. All the granddaughters and his wife lived there. And it's his daughter, Evelyn, sort of said, why don't you go up to West Ham and ask for a job? So he did. He went up there, spoke to Ron Greenwood, the manager, and the old boot man was retiring, and they got Jack in. So he worked there from 1967 to 82. So he was cleaning and repairing the boots of Bobby Moore, Geoff Hurst, Martin Peters, Clyde Best, Sir Trevor Brooking, who all remember him as an amazing guy who did his job diligently but didn't talk about his achievements as a footballer. He was such a humble guy.
Jack Leslie's story is really important because it shows the adversity that can come through prejudice. And so that story needs to go out there as an example. All the recognition that he's getting now, he should have had many years ago when he was alive to have witnessed himself. But we're just so happy to be here.